Alrighty, looks good.
Yep.
Sounds good. Alrighty, so this presentation's pretty straightforward, and Corinne, as you can tell, is tailored to you. But so this is about standing out, and it's looking at the benefit both of applying to jobs outside your major, not just in how you can go about doing that, but also why you might want to. So just to kind of introduce myself a little bit, I am a great hamster mom. This one over here is called Coco. I myself, though, am a graduate of the class of 2019, so just about a year ago. During the time, I was an honors fellow, I was a member of Kappa Delta sorority, and then a part of Omicron Delta Kappa, the National Leadership Honor Society. The reason why that's really important to include right here is I did have a BEA in Strategic Communications. And so given the fact that a lot of this presentation is about the fact of applying to things outside of your major, that is kind of an important aspect to keep in mind. Just to kind of give a little bit more about me and how therefore this all applies, is that you can also do things that are both related or unrelated to the activities that you do at Elon itself. So for me, I'm like this lady right on over here, where I was just juggling anything and everything in the world, just trying my hand at a whole bunch of things. So despite all the things I listed before, I got involved in the political realm, I got involved on the mental health realm, I was a tour guide and diversity ambassador. So just about anything under the sun, I was involved in one way or another at Elon. And so when you're involved in so many different things, it opens up the door to how many things you might want to consider pursuing. That being said, you don't have to just use your experiences directly applicable to what you want to apply for. So to kind of start us off a little bit, to explain that a little more and what that means, I want to start off with just pointing out one of the things that I actually did in my senior year at Elon. Then I had a pretty amazing opportunity where I was actually able to serve as the communications director of a North Carolina State Senate campaign. So this was an awesome paid opportunity where I actually had the opportunity to hire and then help manage 4 interns that I was able to do from Elon University students. So here I was as a senior myself being able to do this. Now, sounds a little strange, especially coming from a strategic communications major, since politics wasn't even a major or a minor of mine. And yet, what it really came down to is the fact of having different skill sets and how you can ultimately apply them to jobs that might not necessarily be the one that folks are looking at. So to actually get to the point of that particular point, what I had done is I first and foremost applied to get into the Iowa caucuses my freshman year. And so going and applying to opportunities, especially while you're at Elon or even right outside Elon, you don't necessarily need the experience to start off with it. You can literally come from next to nothing or just come from passion and drive, pointing out different abilities that you had or skill sets you learned previously. So for example, when I actually applied to do the Iowa caucuses program, which is a winter term kind of abroad program, well, not abroad, but like USA program at Elon, I myself knew next to nothing about politics. My high school education system was not the best when it came to civics courses. And to give you an idea of genuinely how little I knew, when I was actually out in this program, one of the things that my friends got a kick out of me, including my professors, is we went to go visit the Iowa State legislative buildings. And as I'm sitting there, I'm looking around, and I turn to my friend and I go, and she's now about to finish up law school, but I turn to my friend and I go, oh, okay, I get where we are. So Congress has its main house over in DC, and this is their secondary one because of all the West Coast folks. I mean, I wish I could tell you what kind of face she gave me right then and there. I knew next to nothing about politics and government being a part of this program. And then by the end of this program, working on different presidential campaigns, being able to get to meet all these different candidates. As you can see on the right-hand side, that was Marco Rubio as well. Left-hand side, that's obviously kind of relating towards Bernie. But the whole thing is that these different experiences is what later kind of led up and built on top of each other that was able to get me into the job of being the communications director for a state Senate campaign. So again, politics was never a major of mine. It was not even a minor of mine. Only actual class that I took at Elon that was political was the North Carolina Student Legislator, which was a 1-credit course. That is all I took at Elon. And yet I was able to, during the time there, intern and then work for UK Parliament. I was able to intern for a US Senator outside of this. And then, as I said, being able to help run a state campaign, which is absolutely insane. But I was able to do that even though it wasn't my major, because the way I ultimately would do that is by applying the different skill sets that I learned at Elon and making myself stand out. So for example, instead of talking about kind of some of the history and foundational knowledge that most political science majors might have, I focused instead on kind of my experience with Facebook and Twitter through my courses in communications. I focused on the aspects of professional writing, so drawing on my English literature minor. And so I would point out these different skill sets I might have had, whether it be my unrelated degrees to politics specifically, or pointing out different skill sets I might have had as well. So pointing out how I myself am a huge mental health advocate and very involved in the communities. So therefore drawing on that to say how I can relate to other communities as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something that directly relates to your major or your minor, but something that you can come up with too. And even when it comes to a lot of different companies, or in this case, a campaign, sometimes they're also willing to help develop your role as well or redefine the role. Or you can also learn new skill sets as you go throughout it. So for myself, communications director is a specific position in political campaigns. So if I knew I wanted to apply to a political campaign, I could look for that specifically. So among the interns that I then hired, for example, we have 2 right on over here. I don't know if y'all can actually see my mouse. Cool. So this one over here is Jack Devine. I believe he's going to be a junior this year now. And so Jack over here was interested in the financial realm. So he came on as a finance intern. Megan over here was interested in communication. So she came on as a communications intern. So it doesn't have to necessarily be the automatic major you think of. If you're a communications major, you don't have to just apply to a PR firm. If you are a biology major, you don't have to necessarily apply directly to be a lab assistant. There are different opportunities beyond that where you can apply those skill sets beyond what you might normally think in that scope. So basically, by the end of my graduation, in my mind, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going straight into politics. I'm going to go to DC. I'm going to become a politician, help run a campaign, whatever the case. So shout out to BBC over here for the picture minus my face. So that's just a cute little thing. But in reality, what I actually went into, rather than the political realm, is I actually decided to join as an adjuster at Amica Mutual Insurance Company. And this completely blew my mind. And I will say that, gosh, it'd be a year and a half ago from now, if you had mentioned insurance and if that'd be a consideration for me, I would have laughed you out the door. There is not one thing in my background that hinted at insurance. As I said, I was involved in anything ranging from mental health to student government, to the creed and beyond, and not one thing even hinted really at the business realm, let alone insurance. But how I came across it, though, is first and foremost, right on this right-hand side, Amica actually ended up being a case study in one of my classes, where they actually turned into one of our clients. So we were supposed to be focusing on how Amica can recruit on college campuses and attract different types of audiences. So in this regard, we were looking at human service studies, we were looking at communication students and how we can attract them outside of the normal, traditional, conventional mindset of insurance must be business type students. And speaking personally, inside my actual training class, when I eventually did choose Amica, there was 2 out of 40 that actually had some type of insurance or risk management type major degree when they graduated. Even business-wise, it was less than half of them had a business degree. So it does not have to be your major or your minor or anything like that. As I said, I was one of the examples where I was a strategic communications major, English literature minor, but I came to know this company through this particular campaign that we did in this class. So it was actually a little sales challenge we did with them as well. And so myself and my friend Janae, we were 2 communications majors that competed against a lot of kind of your conventional business majors, since the Amica Sales Challenge is done through the business school. And ironically, the two communication students, we are the ones that actually won the sales challenge. And so that's not to pit a competition versus communications and business school, because it's not that. The difference is that made us stand out is that we were outside of the normal scope of the same students that would necessarily apply to this realm. And the concept is that you have different skill sets naturally that apply different ways. And so while we focused on that with the Amica recruitment campaign, when it came time to them asking whether or not I wanted to apply to Amica, I decided why not, because I got to know the company extraordinarily well. So I got to know their values. I got to know what the company represented. I got to realize that even though I never imagined myself in the insurance industry, it completely changed my understanding of what insurance was and how maybe it wasn't this boring thing behind a computer all day long, but instead it was something where you can be boots on the ground, you can be out there talking with different homeowners and policyholders. You can be looking through policy as well, given the fact that you have some really strange cases out there, both in auto vehicles and otherwise. And I'll touch on some of those in a little bit, but what I basically learned through doing this kind of communications project was something that got their attention in me because they got to see me personally. But ironically, the part that actually won them over to me during my interview itself that they later told me on, ironically, wasn't any of that, but was actually when I decided to do a backpacking trip across Europe myself. So basically, right after I had studied abroad in England, I decided through kind of some self-funding, and fortunately, I did have the privilege where I was able to hold on to my funding from my last job rather than needing to use it otherwise. But I actually was able to afford my own kind of solo backpacking trip. And talking about my experiences and about both being flexible and deciding the day of where do I feel like going, but otherwise having checkpoints about where I wanted to end up is what ultimately attracted them to me, knowing that I had that flexibility, but was also able to plan and schedule things. So that's kind of the idea that a lot of employers aren't necessarily looking at what technical skills and what hard skills you learn in your degrees, but that they are interested in those soft skills and those things that showcase your determination, your drive, your passion, things that kind of align with their own brands or what the job roles actually are. So the fact of the matter is, this information is what got me in the door into Amica itself. But why did I ultimately want to do that? What did I ultimately learn by choosing something that was outside of politics or something that was outside of communications, the two realms where I, at that point in time at graduation, felt the most comfortable in? Why did I apply to insurance besides I just got to get to know them? Because you see, Amica, I got to apply to them very early on. So this was actually November that I had to apply to them. Whereas when it came to communications and political jobs, you didn't really start applying to those until you hit April and May. So I had to decide whether or not I wanted this job before I could even start applying to any of the others. But I ultimately did choose Amica, and there are simply no regrets there because there are so many other skill sets that you can learn with these other companies outside of what you might have initially intended. So for example, when I started, I actually started off as homeowners insurance, an associate adjuster here. And I'm not going to lie, it was very strange at first because on one hand, they sent me out on about a 2-week trip out to Wisconsin, of all places, for developmental training, learning about not just the different types of woods over here and species, but a whole lot of other things when it comes to construction of houses and understanding better what kind of disasters could occur. And then on the right-hand side was my second week at Amica, and they gave me a company card and told me to go get myself a pair of Timberlands in case I needed them in house fires. And I know it sounds all strange and that can sound boring, but the thing is that it taught me so many different skills. And the important thing about skills is that it's not always what you anticipate they might be. So many of us think of them as, okay, what skill is going to get me to the next job directly? So for example, if I went into communications, I might say, okay, what job can I take right now that's going to give me experience in Twitter so I can up my metrics? That way the next job can therefore, I can appeal to them more by saying, look at what I did with Twitter, look at what I can do for you with Twitter. A lot of people think linearly in that regard. The thing is you don't always have to think linearly. Most companies, especially right now when we're still on the younger side, those first few jobs, they're looking at what you can do as far as diverse skill sets. They are looking at what kind of soft skills you have and how able and flexible are you to learn new things. Because let's be honest, with these different jobs, most of the time they're going to give you training right off the bat. A lot of the times you might not have learned those hard skills at Elon or anywhere else. And so the question is are you able to adapt to it? And so with a lot of this on the homeowners insurance side, I had seen next to none of it before. But the difference is the things that it taught me weren't necessarily what I plan to use immediately in the next job when and if I choose to apply to another job in the future, because I don't know if I will stay in insurance. The thing is, though, is homeowners insurance actually taught me a lot of both personal things and personal skill sets. So soft skills such as relating to different policy holders. So a lot of them, like let's say a fire burns down their entire house. How do you talk to someone on one of the worst days of their life? Not only that, but it teaches you a lot of personal skills too. So honestly, I was never a handyman in my life. And yet after just doing a few months of homeowners insurance, next thing I know is I'm doing all of the kind of like whenever we have an issue like with the door, I'm the one who's going to fix it. Like, yeah, I can call in like the landlord, but a lot of times now I have the ability to be able to figure out how to do insulation myself now or how to install wooden shelving, things that I had no idea how to do before. And so those skill sets that I'm learning aren't necessarily ones that I'm going to use in my next job, but are personal skill sets that help me as well develop myself as a person, because it'll be helpful not to spend $100, $1,000 every time I need to do something around the house. Outside of homeowners insurance, I then also got to work on bodily injury insurance. And so actually my very second day at Amica, specifically in my office location, I was already going to court. So I was already looking at a case that was going on. And so to understand what bodily injury insurance is, a lot of that actually is similar to an auto accident. So someone got injured in this accident, or it can be the case of like a slip and fall at your house. It could be something like a dog biting you. And so with bodily injury insurance, again, it wasn't something I initially anticipated being interested in at first. But you hear so many strange claims out there that listening to the folks before me as they tried to recruit me is what got me curious about it. So, I mean, for example, I have a claim right now where we literally call it the Fast and Furious claim, where we had one insured who was hit by another car that was carrying, presumably, a couple of convicts. And it seems the driver was drunk. And after they hit our insured, they hit another car. That car hit a house where both that car and the house basically blew up in a fire. And then the convicts and the drunk person escaped. And so a large part of my job right now is actually hunting down this car that 6 months later was thrown in a junkyard. And so right now I'm still in the whole investigation process of helping the police figure out who done it. So it's actually really cool and not necessarily what you'd expect. And so not necessarily speaking just to insurance, but a lot of different fields might be more different than what you expect. And so in this regard, the reason why that this ended up being so interesting to me and taught me different skill sets is first and foremost, it literally got me in court on some of the crazy ones. And so that's important for me because as someone who was interested in politics and government, I am not thrown out completely the idea of maybe wanting to become an attorney in the future. I'm not thrown out the idea of law school. I'm not sure what master's I want to pursue. I know I want to, but I haven't decided, or if I want to do a JD. And so in that case, this job, by being so involved around lawyers, I can't even tell you how many I actually talk to and negotiate with and get to yell at. It's actually quite fun yelling at folks who've been in the field for 30 years and they don't really know that you're a recent graduate. So it's actually quite fun. But you get this experience that you wouldn't have necessarily anticipated otherwise that I can apply later on. So this experience is personal and learning, okay, talking to all these other lawyers and stuff, is this something that I could see myself doing in the future? No? Okay, well then I know to cancel out that career path. If that's something I'm interested in, then great. This can kind of help me both get those connections in the realm, but can also teach me what steps I might need to take. So there are different things outside of your major in these different job fields that you can learn and you can thereby apply your skills to. And honestly, even though I'm the communications major, I also haven't given up my communications skills. And so within Amica itself, I mean, actually today, I had actually was talking with our head of corporate social responsibility, talking to them about how Amica can have a greater impact going forward. It was actually myself, her, and the Officer of Diversity and Inclusion at Amica, so both at headquarters, but here I am actually kind of Skyping with them, talking with them about, okay, what kind of impact can we do going forward? How can I support you? So I'm quoting my research that I did as an honors fellow. I'm talking about my own personal experience at Amica so far. But the fact of the matter is that even though my role technically isn't aligned with the communications degree, I'm not only employing the skill sets I learned from Elon, such as how to interact with these folks, but I'm in confidence and public speaking and so many other skills. But I am also at the same time preparing for that future about whatever I do choose to pursue next. And so being able to go to a company that can both give you that confidence by giving you professional development, by giving you the training you need, by giving you mentorship. These are the different ways and these are the different things you should be looking for in a company, not necessarily aligning directly with your major and the degree that you have, but looking at what is this company? Who are they? Because they are looking at that too. And so I actually talked with my boss. She's the branch manager, and she herself was a public policy and global studies major. And one of the favorite quotes that she gave me is their college education is the baseline. It is what gets their foot in the door. Now they have to be able to market themselves for what they did above and beyond the baseline. So it's not necessarily your major that is putting you down as the baseline. It is the fact that we were able to graduate college. The fact that we have now a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science, that is that first step. At this point in time, these different employers are now looking at what kind of skills you have beyond that. So they are looking at your job experiences, whether it's simply waitressing at a local restaurant, whether it's studying abroad and learning about those travels, whether it's doing scholarly research. So I myself, when I was applying to different jobs, I think I got maybe 1 or 2 questions about my major specifically. All of them instead, I was citing about the research that I had done. I was citing about my travels. I was citing the different professional work that I was able to manage my time with at the same time as school. They aren't necessarily looking at what your major is. Now, in some areas, it can be important and it can have an effect, but in a lot of the other areas, so business, communications, and so many more, what matters is what kind of soft skill sets you have and how can you market yourself. So personally, I know I had about 4 different versions of resumes that I'd send out when I was applying to jobs. And each of them I tailored just slightly. So for example, let's say on that communications director role, what I did, if I was applying to a campaign job specifically, I would talk about more about how like I manage the different employees, and I talk about the metrics in the form of what kind of engagement they had with the audience. If I was applying specifically to, let's say a communications type job, I talk more about the language I was using. I would talk about kind of how I would help proofread and copy edit and so forth. So it really depends on what you're applying for, but most of the things that you are doing, you can tailor to what you are applying for. What you are applying for doesn't necessarily have to be what automatically aligns in your major, because there are so many other opportunities beyond that, especially with these large companies and corporations that exist. There are so many departments that exist beyond that. If you wanted to apply to Microsoft or Google because you hear they're amazing companies, they have so many departments beneath them that range from corporate social responsibility, that range from finance and accounting. All you have to do is determine what companies, what values you might be looking at, and you can apply to those specifically. If you're looking more at smaller companies, then you might want to look ones that are more aligned, but especially if you're looking at medium or larger sized ones, which often do have a lot of really good benefits, that is the thing you want to look for. You don't always have to look for what automatically aligns, what automatically makes sense, because what you really should be looking for, especially for your first job or two, you want to be looking at different thing. So my laptop wants to listen to me and not freeze, apparently. Well, the different things that you want to be looking for are things ranging from what skill sets can you learn. Think about what you need to learn in your personal life, in your professional life, what you might want for your next job, but it doesn't have to stay in one specific area. You want to look for the companies that are giving you the opportunities for professional development and for training. So whether that be a 2-week training in a different state, or whether that be different conferences that they'll let you go to, that way you can learn more, or that be their own resources online that they provide you. And a lot of times you can even ask your employer for additional training about what you might be interested in. So for example, for me, I'm far more interested on the litigation negotiation side of my job. And so I actually reached out to my boss just last week asking, hey, I came across this thing called Master Class. They offer different negotiation classes. Would y'all be willing to foot the bill for this so that I can take them? And sure enough, they're willing to do that. And so I'm actually coordinating with my boss tomorrow about Amica being able to pay for that. That way I can take these different courses. So there are so many different opportunities when it comes down to it that I encourage you to not just look at what automatically makes sense linearly, saying, you know, I eventually want to be in charge of XYZ, so I need to take associate step, then this step to get there, because life is messy, especially with what's going on with COVID right now, and how the job market's a little bit tougher than it was. I fortunately didn't have to deal with that right then, and I'm fortunate enough to have a stable job. But this is one of the reasons that gives you the opportunity to look outside what you might automatically be convinced that you need to apply for this, because you don't have to apply just for that. I encourage you to at least look at other ones and look at the companies that appeal to your personal values. So for me, the thing that ultimately won over the company I'm at now for me was actually the final set of interviews. I was talking with one of the VPs of my company about my research about how corporations are taking more and more stances on social, political, and environmental issues. And she talked to me specifically about what kind of issues they're planning to focus on going forward. And she actually asked for a copy of my research, and that she wanted my assistance as far as determining next steps to get more involved on the environmental issues side. So you can have an impact on companies more than you can think. And you can still align yourself with the company, or you can still learn skill sets or apply your skill sets to these companies if you're interested in pursuing new things, because you never know what you might fall in love with. So I think with that kind of giving my background there, I'm open to any kind of questions y'all might have, whether that be over the chat or if you want to unmute and chat with me.
That was fantastic, Stefanie. Thank you so much. I think it's so great to be able to follow along in your journey and to listen in. And I know Alex quite well as a career advisor, as she is always coming to campus, introducing herself, trying to get in front of students and whatnot. And I've really enjoyed connecting with her and getting to know her. And she's just a great, bright light. So I'm so glad that you've had the chance to interact with her. And I was actually curious to know if you knew her. So it sounds like you do, which is awesome. Well, good for you.
Alex was a key part of my deciding to pursue it, because especially hearing from someone else who initially had an interest in possibly pursuing legal routes or possibly getting involved in politics, I was able to ask her directly, well, why in the world do you apply for an insurance job at this point? She also had no experience in the business realm. And so now the fact that she's climbed 3 ranks now and has stayed with the same company over this time is insane. And so actually one of the really cool things is that she is now my branch manager. So she actually moved over from the Texas office right on over here to kind of the DC Baltimore area. So it was a really cool opportunity there.
That's great. That's fantastic. I love it when worlds kind of match up and people know people that are in common. It really does make the worlds feel small sometimes, which is nice. Yeah. I guess I have a question for you. And Corinne, if you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat feature, or you can also unmute yourself as well and ask it. But I'm curious to know, Stefanie, and looking back through your journey, what kind of advice would you give to your younger self in regards to being a strategic communications major and then getting into the line of assurance. But then also, what kind of advice will you give to yourself, knowing that you've made this shift already, you seem to be enjoying it, and you're already maybe considering and exploring other professional opportunities? What kind of advice would you give to your professional self as well?
Yeah. So to my personal self, back over kind of at Elon, so I guess when I was younger and first deciding on the major, um, I know that I went crazy applying to internships, like kind of like going to junior and senior year. I was looking specifically at anything communications related, rather than trying to do what more have been of interest to me personally. So, for example, I did a summer internship with a company that was kind of a healthcare communications agency. I absolutely hated it. Um, that's just the best way to put it. Like, by the second week, I was already emailing Nigatha Tompkins at that time saying, how can I get out of this? And I couldn't. And so what I kind of should have realized back then that I wish I could have done is that you can explore other opportunities outside of that. Is that while the agency life immediately made sense right then, so many other people are saying, oh yeah, go to this agency, apply to this one, or apply to this specific communications business. The thing is that there are thousands, millions of companies that exist in the US and around the world. And all the large ones and the medium-sized ones have a communications department one way or another. And even the ones that don't would probably be willing to take on a communications intern to help them figure it out going forward. And so the thing is that comes out of it is that you don't have to follow the traditional and conventional path that you kind of think you're put on right away, but you can try other avenues that are more suited to what you're interested in. So had I realized that back then, I could have tried to form my own, whether it be with the political campaigns or try a completely different business. One that might have been just for the heck of it, or one that might have been more up my alley. So just kind of realizing that back then would have been helpful and would have saved me from a not so fun summer with a not so fun internship.
Fair.
And then as far as advice to myself now goes, it's actually just more of a reminder to myself to like enjoy the new skill sets that I'm learning, but it's also okay to employ what you learned as well in the past. So for example, I felt kind of the first few months, I felt like I had so much to learn with this new company, that I was primarily focused on just learning all these new skills and not necessarily employing my old ones that I had learned at Elon. And so it's more of a recent realization that I didn't want to be just this person with this job. I want to be able to know and combine both parts of me, both the new and the old. And so recognizing the fact that over this past month in particular, you know what, communications and social impact are things that are extraordinarily important to me. So that's actually when I started reaching out again, both to like our recruitment teams at Amica, as well as our corporate social responsibility teams, just to kind of talk with them about, all right, like here are some of my viewpoints, here's some of my input, and making those connections are a way of saying, okay, in the future, if this is something I want to pursue, I can both get a feeling from them if I'm interested in this. I can also impact them now. And it's also a much easier step up in the future if I do want to continue with this company. It's a role that I might be looking directly at. It feels a lot better that I didn't necessarily just employ soft skills from Elon Education, because in reality, you can still employ the things that you learned back at Elon, even in a job that is completely different than what you learned. So it's about trying to find that synchronization between the two.
Oh, it's music to my ears. I love it. That's exactly, I cannot agree with you more with that. And I know it can be scary for students, for professionals to kind of make a leap, to kind of shift and to pivot sometimes. But knowing that at the end of the day, it's all about the skill sets and building upon those over the course of a lifetime. And as you discover new passions, new areas of interest, being able to kind of lean into those a little bit more and see where kind of some congruence can happen, and you might be able to overlap a couple different areas of interest. And it seems like you're able to do that right now, surprisingly so, and excitingly enough, where you're able to even start to think about a future career in a direction that maybe is a little bit newer to you, which is amazing and just super inspiring. So it's wonderful to hear, even from a fresh graduate, so to speak, give or take a year out, which is amazing. Amazing. That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that, Stefanie.
Absolutely. I think the key to really know is just you might be surprised by what you love.
Not agree with you more. I can't agree with you more. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for taking some time out of your schedule today, this evening. As I mentioned, this session will be recorded, and the Student Professional Development Center, we have a YouTube page, and that's where this recorded session is going to be going in the future. So you can watch it back and listen in again. And so thank you so much, Stefanie. Thank you so much for sharing and volunteering your time. It was a pleasure to work with you on this assignment. And I wish you both the best of luck, and get out there and crush it. Take care, everybody.
Take care.